and the European Commission unveiling a new strategy for nuclear reactors last month.
Nuclear energy is reliable, providing electricity all year around the clock.
Ursula von der Leyen has just revealed Europe's nuclear energy plan. And trust me, that's something no one expected. What sounds calm on the surface carries a brutal reality underneath. Billions in funding moves, power structures shifting, and nuclear energy creeping back without a clear admission. It hits harder because it feels like something big is already happening while people are still trying to figure it out.
Our bill for fossil fuel imports has increased by over 22 billion euros. 44 days, 22 billion euros, not a single molecule of energy in addition.
It didn't sound like a big moment at all. It came during what looked like another routine policy briefing, the kind that usually blends into the background and disappears from public attention within hours. Ursula von der Leyen was speaking in her usual calm, controlled tone about electrification, investment, and coordination across Europe. Nothing about it felt urgent or dramatic, and that is exactly why most people missed what actually mattered.
But we have homegrown energy sources, nuclear and renewable.
The real story was not in the headlines or the main talking points. It was hidden in a small part of a longer answer, delivered without emphasis, without pause, and without any sense that it would carry serious weight. But that one moment quietly shifted the entire narrative.
Europe's electricity prices are structurally too high. This matters enormously because affordable electricity is not only important for our citizens' cost of living, but it is also decisive for industrial competitiveness.
As she moved through her explanation of Europe's energy future, something unexpected slipped in. Right alongside renewables, she introduced nuclear energy again, specifically small modular reactors, or SMRs. What made this different was not just the mention of nuclear itself, but the way it was presented. There was no hesitation, no framing it as controversial, and no attempt to justify it. Nuclear was placed in the same category as renewables, as if it had always belonged there. For anyone who has followed European energy policy, that wording stands out immediately. For years, the European Union has leaned heavily into wind and solar, shaping its public messaging around a clean, renewable transition. Nuclear, on the other hand, has been politically sensitive, debated, and often treated as a secondary or even uncomfortable topic.
Europe is neither an oil nor a gas producer. For fossil fuels, we are completely dependent on expensive and volatile imports. They are putting us at a structural disadvantage to other regions.
That is why this moment feels so significant. The shift is not loud, but it is clear. Once that shift becomes visible, the broader picture starts to make more sense. Europe is under increasing pressure, not just politically, but structurally. Energy prices have been volatile, supply chains have been strained, and global instability has exposed how fragile certain systems can be. In that environment, the long-standing idea of relying primarily on renewables begins to face real-world limitations. This is where the concept of base load power becomes critical. A stable energy system requires a constant supply that does not fluctuate with weather conditions. That steady flow is what keeps the grid balanced and prevents disruptions. At the moment, renewables alone cannot fully provide that consistency at scale. Storage technologies are improving, but they are not yet capable of covering long periods of low generation across entire regions. This creates a gap, and that gap is becoming harder to ignore.
The industries of the futures, as you have said rightly so, will be built on affordable electricity. Because robotics and AI, just to name two, will drive the next wave of innovation and productivity across all industrial sectors.
What makes this moment more revealing is that it shows a shift driven by necessity rather than ideology. For years, the vision of a fully renewable system has shaped policy discussions, but now reality is pushing back. The system needs stability, and stability requires reliable sources of energy that can operate continuously. This is where nuclear energy, particularly SMRs, starts to re-enter the conversation in a meaningful way. These smaller reactors are designed to be more flexible, less complex, and potentially more cost-effective than traditional nuclear plants. They can be built faster, deployed in different locations, and scaled according to demand.
And that is why industrial competitiveness is increasingly determined by who can best produce, transport, store, and use abundant and affordable electricity.
When von der Leyen referenced them as part of the future, she was not introducing a new idea. She was acknowledging a direction that is already forming behind the scenes. This becomes even more important when viewed in a global context. Countries like the United States and China are already investing heavily in this technology, alongside others such as the United Kingdom, Japan, and Canada. This is no longer just an environmental discussion. It is becoming a strategic and industrial competition.
And together they can become the joint guarantors of independence, security of supply, and competitiveness if we get it right now.
What stands out most is how quietly this transition is being introduced. It appears as a natural extension of the conversation, almost as if the decision has already been made and is now being normalized through language. When something controversial starts being spoken about as if it is already accepted, it usually means the real shift has already happened behind the scenes. Right now there is something very real happening in the background, and it looks a lot like a race to figure out who controls the future of energy. And here is the uncomfortable part for Europe. It is not leading that race. In fact, it is trying to catch up.
While in 1990, 1/3 of Europe's electricity came from nuclear, today it's only close to 15%. This reduction in the share of nuclear was a choice.
Look at who is already moving. The United States is pouring money into next-generation reactors, pushing innovation through both government and private companies. China is not just investing, it is building, testing, scaling, and doing it at speed. That makes everyone else a little nervous.
We want this new technology to be operational in Europe by the early 2030, so that it can play a key role alongside traditional nuclear reactors in a flexible, safe, and efficient energy system.
So when Europe starts talking about SMRs, it is not happening in isolation. It is happening while everyone else is already on the track, already running, and Europe is looking around. That is where things get a little tense, because falling behind here is not just about energy bills or electricity supply. This is about control. The country or region that leads in SMR technology does not just generate power. It exports systems, sets standards, builds partnerships, and shapes the global energy market for decades. It becomes the one others depend on.
Because nuclear and renewables have a key role to play, this is not an either-or. It is in combination that they are most powerful.
Now flip that around. What happens if Europe does not keep up? It risks becoming dependent again, just in a different way. Instead of relying on oil or gas imports, it could end up relying on imported technology, imported infrastructure, even imported expertise. And if recent years have shown anything, it is that dependence makes you vulnerable. Now this is where SMRs come in, and honestly, they sound almost too good to be true at first. Traditional nuclear plants are massive. They take years, sometimes decades to plan and build, and the costs can spiral quickly. SMRs flip that model. They are smaller, more compact, and designed to be built in a more standardized way. Instead of constructing one giant custom-built plant, you can produce multiple smaller units, almost like assembling parts. That opens the door to mass production, which is where things get interesting.
Affordable, resilient, European.
They also solve a very specific problem that renewables alone struggle with. As more wind and solar are added to the grid, the system becomes cleaner, but also more unpredictable. SMRs step in as the stabilizers. But here is where things take a more serious turn, because this is not just about technology or efficiency. There is a deeper layer to all of this, and it has to do with security. Real, hard, geopolitical security. Over the past few years, the world has become a lot more unpredictable. Supply chains have been disrupted, energy routes have been questioned, and entire regions have faced sudden shocks. Europe knows this better than most. It has lived through energy dependence, felt the pressure, and dealt with the consequences. So when nuclear starts coming back into the conversation, it is not just about cleaner energy or better technology. It is about control. And if you listen closely, you can almost hear the underlying emotion driving it. It is not excitement. It is not even ambition. It is caution, maybe even a bit of fear. Not fear in a dramatic sense, but the kind that comes from experience, from knowing how quickly things can change when systems are stretched too thin.
Renewables produce the lowest cost electrons, but they are volatile, depending on sun and wind. And sometimes the best sites are far from industrial demand centers. That is why we need also to invest in storage and in-demand flexibility.
Ursula von der Leyen basically points out that the EU already has financial tools ready, cohesion funds, investment pools, yet somehow they're not being fully used. It's like having a full tank of fuel and still complaining the car won't move. But then comes the twist. Public money alone isn't enough, so now the message shifts toward private capital. Looking ahead, the direction becomes clearer. Europe is likely moving toward a hybrid energy model. Renewables will still play a major role, but nuclear is stepping back into the center, not as a backup, but as a core part of the system. That means more investment, more infrastructure, and a stronger push to compete globally. Economically, this could reshape entire industries. Technologically, it could position Europe differently in the global race. And politically, it marks a turning point, a shift from ideal-driven planning to reality-driven strategy. And what makes all of this so fascinating is how quietly it's happening. No big announcement, no dramatic turning point moment, just a series of small signals that, when you connect them, reveal something much bigger. Because in the end, the EU didn't stand up and declare a nuclear comeback. It just started talking like it's already underway.